Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for another mailbag. It is the post-US Open mega mailbag, where I will answer your hot takes, observations, questions, and ultimately your comments about tennis or anything else. You left some questions for me in my Discord server. Link is in the description of that. Most of the comments come from the YouTube community tab, which has been the traditional place to leave a mailbag comment. I'll also add, if you leave an Apple review, an Apple podcast review, and in that review there's a question, I will also happily include that in the mailbag. So those are the ways to get involved. I do want to hit a couple topics before I get to the first question. They're really quick. They're things that nobody asked me about, but they're pretty big news items. The first being Rafa Nadal has withdrawn from Laver Cup. I'm a little bit confused. I've been confused about what the direction is for Rafa, what he wants to do with this last chapter, what the next year or so looks like. You know, obviously he started the year saying this is probably going to be my last year. He had another injury at the right before the Australian Open, comes back, plays a full clay court season healthy. The results, there were flashes of really, positive things, but if you look at Roland Garros and the Olympics, and yeah, the draws were awful, could not be worse. But if you look at those two events and you look at the fact that he had a healthy lead up to those events and the preparation was ideal, and he couldn't be competitive in either of those matches against Zverev or Djokovic, in terms of Nadal contending for these big titles ever again, bleak, right? Certainly it looks bleak. I said it after the Djokovic loss at the Olympics. I can't imagine that didn't put a large dent in Rafa's belief. But then it goes back to, okay, we're going to make a decision now about the future. How much longer do we want to play? How much do we want to play? And there's been a change in Nadal's withdrawals because he pulls out of the US Open, he pulls out of Laver Cup, but he doesn't say he's injured. What's that? It could be a couple of things. Either one, he's not injured, or two, he feels embarrassed to continue to kind of explain to everybody which part of his body has failed him, at this point. But I don't know. He was healthy coming out of clay court season, and then he withdrew from the US Open. I forget the specific timing of it, but there wasn't a lot of time for him to get injured between those points. So my interpretation was he didn't really want to play on the hard courts in New York. Laver Cup, though, it's not that serious. So in his statement, he basically said, well, it wouldn't be good for Team Europe if I played. Well, I don't know. It kind of goes back to this awkward scenario with Laver Cup. Is it a highly competitive event? Is it an exhibition? I think most people agree that it would be somewhere in between. But as we saw with the Federer doubles last year, if you can't be at your very best, it's okay. You can still play. So I'm confused. And my only hypothesis when it comes to what Rafa wants to do, my only hypothesis right now is that he's confused. This isn't me being conspiratorial. This is me looking at the sequence of events and just things aren't really adding up because Rafa said, look, I don't want to end my career on an injury. That made a ton of sense. Right now, as far as we know, he's not injured. Obviously, if he was contending for the biggest titles, that would be another reason to not retire and to prolong this thing. That's not happening either. So he's not injured. He's not really contending. He's not playing either. What's happening here? I don't know. But my sense is that Rafa doesn't know either. I've been calling Davis Cup this week. Not going to lie. It's been an intense month. Feeling a little burnt out, but I only have a couple more days left until everything's going to get a little bit more relaxing. I have a quick idea I want to throw out there because I actually think this week in Davis Cup is a lot of fun. I think it's a blast. You have the 4 different nations, 4 different groups, 4 teams in each group, and they all play a round robin. and the top 2 teams advance. And the continuous action, especially when the time zones are intersecting, I actually think this week is a lot of fun. But of course, it's not going to have the juice because it's the week after the US Open, so there's a lot of fatigue. And also, it's incredibly difficult to follow, and I don't think fans understand the format. And in terms of the promotion of it, oftentimes it comes from separate channels than fans are used to. So it's very difficult for fans to follow. I think those who do make an effort to kind of get it and immerse themselves in it, I think it's a lot of fun. The way I would fix Davis Cup, though, because I think this week is better than the finals at the end of November, which I think is flat, falls flat. Instead of the top 2 teams advancing out of each group, only the top team should advance, and then go back to home and away ties for the semifinals and the final. And if they could go back to that, I would love Davis Cup. Right now, I can't say I love Davis Cup because as fun as this week is, post-US Open, for all its flaws, the finals just do not deliver. All right, let's get in the first comment. All right, from user, hey Gill, I've seen comments about Alcaraz's, quote, mentality because of the fact that on his off days, he seems to be a bit, quote, lost and can't switch to a plan B or C like Djokovic. How would you define mentality? It seems that Alcaraz is more fearless in pressure moments, so even in losing situations, he plays his best shots, but sometimes backfires, resulting in many errors. Djokovic, someone who is thought to have a strong mentality, seems to find a way to win even when not much seems to be working, and thus can make comebacks from 0-2 down at slams. Would you consider Alcaraz strong mentally, but just in a different way than someone like Novak? Yes, I would. I would consider him strong mentally, but in a different way. This is what I was kind of contending with after he lost to Van de Zandschulp at the US Open. Because part of me wanted to be like, does Alcaraz have is there a bug in Alcaraz's approach when things aren't going right? Part of me wanted to go there. But what stopped me was the fact that, look, everyone kind of agreed that Alcaraz wasn't maybe at the peak of his powers all through Roland Garros or all through Wimbledon. There were so many matches where he found a way, so many matches where he had that clutch factor, that figure out a way to win factor, coming back from 2-1 down in both the semis and the finals at Roland Garros against top players. At Wimbledon, got into some sticky situations against Tiafoe, against Hugo Humbert, figures out a way. So we've seen that kind of find a way to win from Alcaraz. We've seen it so many times this year that to just take the Van de Zandschulp loss and to be like, yeah, Alcaraz, he has to be going right or else he loses. I don't think that's fair. But what I love about the comment here is that we are comparing a difference in style, a difference in mentality, instead of saying one is better than the other. And tennis discourse could be so much better off if we do more of that and less of like, let's rank things. As much as I like ranking things. Yeah, I think here's how it could be summarized. The difference is what is going to keep Novak Djokovic up at night. What to him is inexcusable. And for him, I think that is making a lot of mistakes and therefore giving something away to his opponent for free. That is going to keep him awake at night. He never wants to do that. He never wants to feel like that. And maybe that's starting to change. He understands that the style of tennis that he has to play is a little bit different. But I think that was pretty much Djokovic and Nadal's mentality, certainly when they were in their physical primes. That even if I have a horrible day, I'm still not going to make errors because errors are just inexcusable. I think that, that was kind of the mentality. Alcaraz, what keeps him up at night? What is inexcusable? Not going for it. That's what Alcaraz cannot accept. If he feels like, yeah, I just didn't back myself. I wasn't confident enough to play my tennis. That's the difference. Before I get to the second comment, I want to tell you about the sponsor of today's show, which really has everything to do with habits. I know we all have some bad habits on the tennis court, And maybe we're guilty of hitting a couple of drop shots from 5 feet behind the baseline, or we're off balance and out of position and we try to take the ball hard down the line. Then there's some more serious bad habits off the court, and our sponsor Fume is all about kicking those bad habits and starting a movement towards better ones. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device that helps people fill the void, ditching a bad habit that you can leave. But with Fume, you still have something to reach for. It's not a vape. There's no vapor, so you can use it anywhere. There's no nicotine, so it's not addictive. The flavors are non-toxic, so it's a guilt-free alternative, and there are no batteries, so you'll never need to charge it. Plus, it looks awesome, all right? It's got a great, quality design, some weight to it, and it's fun to fidget with. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use my code Gill Gross to receive a free topper. It's the perfect accessory to your Fume device. You just slip it onto the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. Head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use code Gill Gross or scan the QR code on the screen, and you'll get your free Fume topper when you order your Journey Pack today. From GBags98. Hey Gil, what are your thoughts on Taylor Fritz's ability to win a slam in the near future? His movement has improved drastically, and he is great off both wings. I'd also love to hear your take on whether Rune or Tsitsipas can win a major in their career. They seem to have all the tools, but their inconsistency really seems to be holding them back. All right, let's start with Fritz. Look, I think chances are no. What would have to happen? A lot of things would have to break his way, in my opinion, because if he comes up against a player of Jannik Sinner's caliber who performs close to their best, as Jannik Sinner did in that final, I don't know that Taylor can ever win that match. And most of it is because, for as much as his movement has improved, it's never going to look like that. It's never going to be there. Offensively, yeah, there are some things that could be polished up to a point where he's relying even less on his movement, particularly if he becomes less of a baseline player and he's able to use the skill that he has off the ground to get to the net and be a clinical finisher. But again, think about how far away he is from that. We're looking at a player who came to the net 6 times in the first 2 sets against Sinner. So we're having to make a massive leap in reimagining what Taylor Fritz might be able to do to become so offensively imposing that he can beat someone playing at Jannik Sinner's level in that US Open final. Now, maybe things can break in a way where he never faces an elite player playing at their best. And that could happen. But I think that's what it would take. Not to say he had, a really easy draw at the US Open. He had the misfortune of playing Matteo Berrettini in the second round, handled that match beautifully. Zverev wasn't a very good version of Zverev. Tiafoe in the semis, it brought its own, I think, nerve-wracking kind of circumstances, but a player who he had a 6-1 head-to-head against coming in. Taylor's not always going to get that. So I think if things break right for him, it could happen, but chances are no. Rune. Look, Rune still has so much time to try to figure things out, so much time to develop. Still someone who has high expectations for himself, wants it very badly, a little bit lost right now. I think anybody can see that. But I still have a lot of hope for Holger, especially when your verbiage is the word can. You're saying, can they win a Grand Slam in their career? And I'm always going to be pretty generous if you're asking me can. Because if everything breaks right for Holger Rune, yeah, he can and he will if everything breaks right. Look, Tsitsipas, I thought it was always going to be very difficult for Tsitsipas. There was a point in his career where I thought at some point things would probably work out for him and he probably would have that moment at a slam, potentially clay, when Rafa was no longer in the picture. But I never thought it was going to be easy for Tsitsipas. It's going to take a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of, dogged determination in order for him to get that done. And I don't know if that is still there for Tsitsipas. So again, if I'm saying, do I think he'll win a major? At this point, my answer is no. Even though I think he had the potential to, clearly he had the potential to do it. I just think he's lost a little bit of that ambition and a little bit of that drive and a lot of that belief. From user, could you rank the current ATP top 10 players based on how well they play on a hard court? I love how we said, it's so great when we don't do rankings. And now, 2 questions later, we're going to do some rankings. So look, the reality is I don't think the top 10 on hard court differs that much from just the top 10. No, I mean, there might be some differences. To be completely honest, I did my top 10 in my head, and then I checked Tennis Abstract's hardcourt ELO, and we basically had the same thing. There's one disparity in it, but it's Sinner number 1 quite clearly. It's Djokovic number 2. I know he hasn't done much this year, but last year he absolutely dominated hardcourt. So you give him a grace period of more than 1 year, I would say, in that respect. Alcaraz is 3, Medvedev is 4. I know you might say Medvedev is more like geared towards hardcourt than Alcaraz. That might be true, but like, think about it. Are you picking Medvedev over Alcaraz if they play at the Australian Open right now or a week from now, or at the US Open a week from now? I don't think I am. I still think I'm taking Alcaraz, especially if he's settled into the tournament and, you know, playing the level that he's capable of. I'm definitely taking Alcaraz. Zverev after Medvedev at number 5. It's tight between Medvedev and Zverev at this point, but still trust Medvedev a little bit more on hard court at this point. And then 6, this is where it gets interesting. This is the only spot where I disagree with Elo, because Elo has Rublev at 8. And I think in the larger picture, Rublev should be in this 6th spot. Like, in terms of what Rublev usually brings on hard court, I think he's in the 6th spot. Elo has Dimitrov, and I get that because Dimitrov has been really hot, especially best of 3 hard court over the course of the last year. So I totally see where that is coming from, but I'm still taking Rublev. Like, let's say we talk about 2025. Who do I think is going to get more hard court wins in 2025? Rublev or Dimitrov? Rublev. Definitely Rublev, if you're asking me. Then you have, between Dimitrov and Fritz, it's really tight. I'm gonna go with Fritz, and then I'll go Dimitrov at 8. Hurkacz 9, Ruud 10, which is what Elo has. Hurkacz 9, Ruud 10. From Matthew. Hey, Gill, Sinner has clearly been the best hardcourt player over the past 12 months, with victories at both the Australian Open and US Open this year. My question is, which hardcourt slam has more favorable conditions to Sinner? Both seem to have been playing faster in recent years, which seems to suit his play style. Curious on your thoughts regarding this topic. As always, appreciate the insightful content that you provide. Thank you for that. They're basically the same. I don't know how else to put it. They're basically the same. I mean, let's go through the factors here. CPI, which measures court speed, they're both right around 42, which is medium fast. It's really on the faster side, but they're both right around 42. Altitude, that's a big factor in terms of speed. How quickly is the ball moving through the air? That has to do, largely with the thickness of the air. They're both sea level. Okay? No difference there. Temperature. New York is usually a little bit hotter. And I did look it up, and the average temp in New York in August, 69 degrees is your average low, 84 is your average high. And in Melbourne, it's 60 is your average low, 79 is your average high. So, all right, like Melbourne's usually 70 degrees. New York is usually high 70s. Not a huge difference there. So It's the same, you know? I think there's a decent argument to be made that it would be interesting if we got a wider disparity between the hardcourt majors in terms of speed. There's an argument there. I would want Australian Open to be the slower one because the conditions are a little bit easier on the players. You don't get as many of those like stifling days where it can be pretty tough if the conditions are really slow and it's crazy hot and humid. And it's at the end of the year when everybody is freaking tired already. I wouldn't want that. So if I were to choose between, one hard court slowing down, I would think Australia would be a better idea. But yeah, I don't have an answer for the question of which slam Jannik would play better at. It really has to do with, or it's going to have to do with which place is he happier at? Which venue does he vibe with more? But I think even more importantly, number one factor is probably, does Jannik feel more comfortable coming out of his offseason training block and playing a major without a lot of match play under his belt? Or does he gain more of an advantage from the calendar spot that is the US Open, which of course is well into the season? Everybody is not only in rhythm, but oftentimes starting to wear down a little bit. All right, next one is from Nadal Brought Me to Tennis. Hi, Gill. Would love your perspective on Nick Kyrgios' most recent tweet regarding one of his exes, Sinner's current girlfriend, as well as his numerous, often misinformed tweets about Sinner's positive doping tests. Should commentators be held to some sort of professional standard when it comes to their public statements and behavior? I work in education and can be fired for public behavior. We also have rules. For example, we can't friend students on social media in the district where I work. Or should the profession embrace free speech, a perspective even Sinner has publicly espoused, and not regulate anything? Thanks as always. All right, very good question. Very good question. First of all, there is a difference between the two subjects. I think what he replied, when he replied to that tweet of the picture of himself and Anna Kalinskaya, that was immature, misogynistic, immoral, degrading, all of those things for absolutely no reason, right? His opinions on Jannik Sinner, I think his takes are bad. I disagree with his takes. But his opinion is that anyone who tests positive for a banned substance should automatically be gone for 2 years. That's his opinion. There's a huge difference between his opinion, which you may think is a bad opinion. I certainly do. But to me, that's not punishable or problematic. I just think it's a bad opinion, right? Very different from the Kalinskaya thing. So those two things are a little bit different. But your question is, should commentators be held to some sort of professional standard? And the answer is 100%. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's almost inarguable. And it's not because of wokeism or political correctness. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with, we need to let people enjoy tennis, and we need to make sure that anybody who is watching tennis is having a good time watching tennis, is not being turned off from the tennis. Like, at the end of the day, when we're talking about a tennis broadcast, that's the goal. And I think if someone is doing certain things publicly on social media, can that detract from someone's enjoyment of turning around and watching them commentate or deliver their punditry about tennis on the television product? Yes. Andrea Petkovic wrote about this in her newsletter, and she's absolutely right. Some of the stuff that Nick does on social detracts from what he is saying on the air, because it is impossible for viewers to separate those two things from one another. The guy is the guy. It is a full picture. So it does matter what you're doing on the internet. However, it's also unreasonable to expect that everybody is going to be held to the same professional standards. And you find this in all walks of life. Not everybody, again, any company in the world, you can see this. You might think everybody plays by the same rules. It ain't how the world works. Never has been, never really will be. I mean, there are some exceptions, but you can look at all sorts of codes of conduct and, professional standards. And the reality is some people have a certain level of value or a certain reputation that precedes them, and they can get away with more than others can get away with. And I think for many reasons, I'll just say, and I don't want to name names and I want to be careful here. It's a really loud motorcycle out there. I want to be careful here, but there are people on the ESPN commentary team who most certainly would not have been able to get away with that. I think it's safe to say. But I just want to, repeat the fact that people can't choose their commentators when they watch tennis. They can't choose. They are subjected to you no matter what. If somebody doesn't like my show, Monday Match Analysis, Gill Gross YouTube channel, they don't have to watch. They just don't watch, and everybody's okay. Nobody gets hurt, right? If somebody doesn't like my commentary and I'm on the television on the tennis that they want to watch, I can't say, okay, bye-bye, don't watch. No, they're trying to watch tennis. Not watching is not an option. So it's my job as a commentator to be inoffensive. And there are even things that I'll say on this channel that I wouldn't say on the air because my job is different. My job on the air is to be inoffensive. I should not be turning people off from tennis. If I'm turning people off, I'm not doing my job as well as I can be. And Nick has been really good on the air, really insightful, and there's been a lot of things to really love. But if his internet stuff is turning people off, yeah, that's a problem. There's another comment here about Nick. I don't know if my answer would be any different to any of these questions. What did I think of Nick's coverage? From what I saw, it was good. I didn't see him calling any matches for ESPN, but I saw him in that kind of studio role. I don't watch a lot of ESPN during the U.S. Open because I'm working on site. I'm watching a lot of matches in person, and I'm on U.S. Open radio for normally 8 to 10 hours every day, so I'm not watching a lot of ESPN. Do you think Nick was genuinely angry that Sinner was let off easy, or was there some alternative motive for his comments? No, I think he was genuinely angry. I think Nick is nothing if not genuine. I don't think Nick is phony or fake, basically ever, to be completely honest. Should he have been taken off the air? Should he have been taken off the network? He should have, at the very least, been told that it's not acceptable. So I don't think it's acceptable. If he were taken off the air, I would have understood it, but frankly, it probably would have made things worse for ESPN. Would have been a way bigger story for ESPN if they took him off the air. So I don't blame them for not. I'm not really surprised that they didn't. Hopefully they said none of that because, again, totally unnecessary. And I think very different from the Sinner stuff. I would hesitate to conflate the two because I think they're different. One might be an opinion that you disagree with, but the other is completely needless. All right, from Emily Moyer. Hey, Gill, during the semifinals and finals, I noticed that almost every time Jessica Pegula hit a serve, it sounded like it was a let. Sometimes it even looked like it. Needless to say, the tech was not calling any lets. I was watching with my girlfriend, and at first she thought I was crazy when I mentioned it, but then she started to hear and see it as well. I'm open to the idea that I was just hearing an echo or some other sound effect, but it was not happening with any other player. Curious if you or anyone else noticed this. Okay, and then there are 2 replies here that are like, me too. This is crazy. Jessica Pegula Let-Gate. I actually think it's because, I think it's because she lands really hard on her left leg. I think the timing of when she lands on her left leg pretty much lines up with when the serve crosses the net. And that's my best theory. Because I did go back on YouTube highlights. I watched it. I know what you're talking about. I hear it too. I think it's Pegula basically stomping her left foot on the court at the moment the ball crosses the net. But I don't know. Maybe it is the UFOs. Another one from user, I think a different user, but one of those users out there. Hi, Gill. I saw in a previous mailbag that you ranked the 4 Alcaraz slams. Could you rank the impressiveness of Sinner and Alcaraz's 2024 slam titles based on how tough their draws were? Well, sure, I can, but can people promise not to be super immature about this? Because usually people are really immature about this. Because somehow it's like a badge of honor when players get tough draws and make it through. While it's impressive, it's like it's out of these players' control. You beat who's in front of you. So when Jannik Sinner has a run like he did at the US Open, objectively the easiest run to a slam title that we've seen all year long. There's no doubt about it. But what did he do? He crushed everybody. He destroyed everybody. So what do you want him to do? Right? So if you're a Sinner fan and you're offended by the fact that Jannik had the easiest path, I don't know what to tell you. You shouldn't be offended. I mean, the fact that he got a pretty easy path and he handled that easy path as he should have. So Sinner US Open is number 1, the easiest. And number 2, I do think would be Sinner's Australia. Now, on paper, certainly the Sinner Australian Open run, it looks actually quite tough because you're looking at Medvedev in the final and you're looking at Djokovic in the semis. It's just the circumstances there. I mean, Medvedev, absolute miracle that his legs didn't fall off before he reached the final. But by the time he reached the final, I mean, just very compromised. I mean, he was in a really rough position physically. And it's absolutely miraculous that he won 2 sets, but don't let that distract from the fact that Medvedev really didn't have his legs in that match. And we saw in the last 3 sets, particularly the 4th and the 5th, it was a no contest. It was uncompetitive because Medvedev couldn't run anymore. Djokovic in the semis, he played badly. You can tell me it's Novak Djokovic, cool, but in the first and the second set, it's basically the worst I've ever seen Novak play. And I know he didn't play, he was limited in the Wimbledon final against Alcaraz as well, but I think he played worse in this Australian Open match than he did in the Wimbledon final against Alcaraz, even though he won a set. Rublev in the quarters, Khachanov in the 4th round, Khachanov as the 15 seed kind of overranked at that point in the year because we've seen what his trajectory has been in 2024. It's been a rough go for him. Baez in the 3rd round, really, really fantastic seed to draw. So it's really more about the end to me than whatever happens in the first week. But I think it wasn't an easy path, Sinner's Australian Open, but I do think Alcaraz's 2 slams were both tougher. Roland Garros for Alcaraz, on paper, the toughest. Most most top players by far for Alcaraz to have to face Zverev and Sinner and Tsitsipas, a former finalist at RG. Wimbledon, guys played really well against Alcaraz. So I think on paper, you'd say that Roland Garros was the toughest. If you watched, though, I'm not sure you'd be in the same place. Roland Garros is still probably the toughest. I think to go Sinner, Zverev back to back with, both of them posing pretty solid threats, I think that's the toughest. But I don't know, Francis played well in that match. Humbert played well in that match. Tommy Paul played really well in that match for 2 sets. Medvedev played all right. Djokovic didn't have his movement in the final, really. So it wasn't the most impressive final. But, yeah, to me, Alcaraz's slams were tougher. So hopefully folks are able to hear that without thinking that suddenly I hate Jannik Sinner. But some members of both fan bases are convinced that I hate their guy anyway, so that won't change. Next one from member Lindsay. I've seen headlines saying that Aryna Sabalenka has a similar average forehand speed to the top men on tour, maybe higher. Do you have access to the highest forehand speeds on both tours? I assume Carlos, Jannik, Jari, etc. have faster top speeds than Aryna, but I can't easily Google it. Well, I don't have it for the women because there's this info is never available for WTA events because they don't have the infrastructure there. And then every time we go to a slam, the slams do have this info. And then inevitably one of the TV partners, or in some cases the world feed, flashes up a graphic that shows that Sabalenka is hitting her forehand as fast on average as the top men, and then it goes viral. And it happens every other tournament. And I'm not going to lie, it kind of pisses me off. It's when are we going to stop acting surprised that Sabalenka hits her forehand as big as the men? She does. So can it stop going viral on Twitter and Reddit whenever she does this? This is how it is. If you threw topspin in there, you'd see that the forehand is not as heavy as the top men. The biggest forehand weapons on the men's side, they get a lot more RPMs, but Sabalenka's is just as fast. The answer to your question, though, ATP average forehand speed is 75 miles per hour. Sinner, Alcaraz, and Djokovic last year, I don't know about this year, but last year they all averaged between 78 and 79 miles per hour. Usually the tour leaders, the ATP leaders, hover around 81 miles per hour. I've seen, Nicholas Basilashvili, Matteo Berrettini, Dominic Thiem, Nicholas Jarry. I've seen all those guys kind of hover around 81, and that's usually the number that kind of tops off the men's tour. Through a few rounds at the U.S. Open, Sabalenka was averaging 80 on her forehand. It probably went down a little bit in the latter stages of the event, better competition, not getting to hit as many forehands with her feet set on balance with as much time as she'd like. But yeah, average speed, Sabalenka, she'd be right up there on the ATP tour. So let's stop acting surprised. From anonymous tennis follower. Hi, Gill. I think we can all agree that Swiatek and Nadal are very similar players. Both have high topspin forehands and excel on clay because of it. However, while Nadal prefers to hang deep behind the baseline and grind out his opponents, Swiatek is much more aggressive and prefers to stay on the baseline, hitting winners and sharp-angled shots to make her opponents run. This is a result of her current coach, Tomasz Witkarowski, instilling a more aggressive mindset in her when he came on in 2022. However, now I am starting to question whether this was the right decision, given that Swiatek's forehand is easily rushable, and by refusing to back off the baseline, she makes herself even more susceptible to being rushed. In contrast, Nadal, who also needs time on his forehand, makes himself less vulnerable to being rushed by playing deeper behind the baseline. I just think that even though Swiatek has incredible success so far with her aggressive approach, it would be much tactically wiser to let her move back and play from deeper in the court, especially since she has the movement and physicality to play that sort of game. And also, given how much success Nadal has had with his own game, do you agree with this take? What are the potential drawbacks of Swiatek taking a deeper court position? By the way, this is not an emotionally charged reaction to one of her recent losses, just something I'm wondering at the back of my mind when I see her playing badly. On a side note, hope you enjoyed the U.S. Open and you are not feeling too burnt out. Well, U.S. Open, I was working late nights, and all this week I've been getting up really early for Davis Cup. So sleep schedule, it's messed up, and I'll get a rest next week. But this week has not been easy from a gas tank standpoint. Look, I think this is a great comment. I've thought the same thing watching Iga. But, look, it's really hard to say that somebody who is number one in the world should change their approach. It's really hard to do. But what I would say is I don't think Iga needs to choose one or the other. I think where she can improve is becoming dynamic as a north-south mover, which would, I think, really separate her even more than she has already separated herself. And what does that look like, and what am I talking about? I'm talking about reading whether or not her opponent is in a position to rush her and adjusting her court position during the points accordingly. What does that look like? Well, as soon as you hit a ball, when you're playing a rally, as soon as you hit a ball, the first thing you're calculating is, did I achieve quality? Where is my opponent? How hard did I hit it? How deep did I hit it? How angled did I hit it? And you're starting to think, on the other side of the net, what am I going to be dealing with here? Did I hit it weak? Is Aryna Sabalenka winding up and, getting to lean into a forehand from the middle of the court? You make that read. And if you make that read and determine, okay, I'm about to be attacked with pace, which you can tell as soon as you hit your own ball, you have to try to figure that out. You move back dynamically. If you say, maybe you're 7 feet back behind the baseline or more, and you hit a ball that says, oh, wow, I just got back to neutral because I just hit a really good deep ball, and there's no way my opponent is going to be able to attack me off of this ball. Now I'm moving up and looking to take time away off of the next ball. Something that, I've talked about with other players in the past before, but it's something that I'd love to see a little bit more of off of Iga, but also it's playing the matchups. And sometimes against these big hitters who are successfully rushing her forehand, who are achieving great depth, who are attacking her right down the middle at her forehand. Yeah, move back. Move back. Especially if they're not beating you with angles, especially if they're not drop shotting, especially if they're not coming forward, coming to the net. Yeah. And then return position, right? Sometimes her forehand return can be a struggle, and she doesn't move back. Now, that's not about reading the game at all. That's all about a decision that you make before the point on where to position yourself. And I'd like to see, again, more options for Iga, more dynamic options for her. I was really happy, really excited to see Zheng Qinwen stand really, really deep, because I don't see it a lot on the women's tour. And there are reasons for that. A lot of the women feel like offense is the name of the game, like that they need to take time away, that maybe they don't have the weight of shot to play from really, really deep in the court and remain unattackable or perhaps remain offensively threatening. But Iga Swiatek, Zheng Qinwen, hell yeah, they have the weight of shot to play from back there. Yeah, they do. So, again, and they have the speed as well, the foot speed. I'd love to see them take advantage of that. I was happy to see Zhang do it. With some success, by the way. Didn't work against Sabalenka, but it did against Donna Vekic, right? Another really huge hitter. That said, Iga's struggles are not technical. They are mostly mental. They're mostly about her anxiety, in my opinion. So I enjoyed going through that tactical stuff, and I think all that stuff is valid, but ultimately, it's usually not why she's losing matches. Next one is from Vinko. Gill, what would you say are the reasons why Fritz has a great record against Zverev, but hasn't been able to extend that record to other top 5 players? And more generally, can you speak about why these, quote, good matchups are not generalizable? Okay, I got to say you lost me on that, but I can answer the first part of the question. Paul Alcaraz is another recent entry on good matchup list. I mean, one could naively think that if these players can put one member of the top 5 in trouble, they should be able to beat more regularly of the top 10. Okay, I see what you're saying. Look, matchups matter in tennis. Matchups matter a lot. So, man, if you're asking me why do matchups matter, I mean, obviously it's a big question, but I mean, a couple of things to think about are it's not always strengths aligning with weaknesses, but I think the two things to look at is either a player's strength goes directly at a player's weakness. So you have a strength-weakness matchup. Let me give you an example. Andrei Rublev against a huge server, right? He's got a rough record against Hurkacz, a rough record against Raonic, rough record against Isner. There are others, but, like Hurkacz against, Rublev against big servers. Well, Andrei's defensive returning isn't great. Andrei's ability to absorb pace on the first serve return isn't great. He doesn't make a lot of returns in play against these big servers. So, is that going to hurt him when he is facing Francisco Cerundolo? It is not going to hurt him when he's facing Francisco Cerundolo. It is going to hurt him when he's facing Hubert Hurkacz. It's one example. Or Zverev, potentially. Or Medvedev, who, he hasn't had the best record against throughout his career. So do you have a strength aligning with weakness? Not always that, though. Sometimes it's strength on strength. It is a top player. It is a player's strength that usually gives them an advantage lining up with another player's strength. And that can be problematic. Big example there, Nadal Djokovic. Nadal's strength, attacking the righty backhand with height. Novak Djokovic, particularly on hard court, incredible backhand on the rise. Incredible at taking the backhand early before it gets up above the shoulders, hitting it clean, hitting it deep, hitting it hard, hitting it consistent. So, Nadal's strength went into Novak's strength. What happened there? A little bit of a problem for Rafa. It's another example. So, Fritz-Zverev, you want to ask about? What do I think that is? I think that's more of the strength to strength thing. I think Zverev has found... Actually, look, it's a little bit of both. Because backhand to backhand, usually Zverev has a lot more joy. And Fritz can kind of hang with him in that pattern. And, at least ball strike with Zverev backhand to backhand. That's pretty rare. It's pretty darn rare. But Fritz has the ability to do that. And Taylor loves a target, I've noticed. Taylor loves to have a plan in his head. When he has an opportunity to attack weaker wings, he usually performs at a very high level. He's got a great record against Berrettini. He's got a great record against Tsitsipas. He's got a great record against Zverev. And in the past, he has loved going into Zverev's forehand, finding the attackable ball because Zverev is prone, especially on the cross-court forehand, to offer up something a little bit more attackable. So Fritz, get it to the Zverev forehand. Zverev goes cross-court with the forehand. Unleash. Fritz unleashes his forehand. So he kind of likes the patterns in that head-to-head. And for Zverev, I just don't think he has a lot of great ideas about what he likes to do against Taylor. Is it grinding him down and beating him with consistency? Is it, it's actually tough to do that against Fritz because he can be pretty steady from the back of the court unless he feels like he needs to press because you're making, you're attacking him. So think about what Taylor's defense, what's Taylor's weakness? Defense, right? Defense. What does Zverev not do very often? Put players on defense, especially once the point gets to neutral. Zverev does not, he's not very good at that. He's very good at grinding you down, hitting a lot of really, really good solid trading without giving you anything. Really good at defending, not very good at making you defend. So, comparatively, everything's relative, okay? But, okay, there's another example. So, weakness to weakness there. Zverev doesn't find the strength to weakness, which he wants. Hope that makes sense. Next one is from member Yannick Murray. Hey, Gill, I have two questions that are closely linked. Carlos Alcaraz has not made a final on non-Indian Wells hardcourt since Cincy last summer. Before that, it was U.S. Open 2022. Is it time to accept that Carlos is not a Tier 1 hardcourt player on anything remotely quick? Is it time to accept that he's not Tier 1? Probably not. It's probably jumping the gun. I think there's some circumstantial stuff, if we're being honest. I think there are a lot of other things it could be. Now, definitely, quick indoor hardcourt. Does that really take away from Alcaraz's strengths? Yes, absolutely. But if you look at some of the stuff that went down there, first of all, just like winning Wimbledon last year, beating Djokovic in the final, a little bit of an adjustment there, in terms of the position, the expectations that he was shouldering, loses the heartbreaker in the Cincinnati final. Did that have a little bit of a residue? Post-US Open, was he tired? This year, same thing with the fatigue factor. I mean, it was just a beast of a summer. I think we saw it affect Djokovic. I think it affected Zverev in some kind of way. It affected Alcaraz. It seemingly affected Iga Swiatek if we want to cross over to the women's side because it's topical at the moment. So, yeah, I think it's jumping the gun a little bit when you look at some of the circumstances. All right, the next part of this is, given that Yannick is 4,000 points ahead of Carlos, do you think the debates for who is the best player in the world are pretty useless, as though Carlos had great peaks over the summer and has been unable to maintain consistency, especially on the tour, for over a year? Many thanks. No, I don't think the debates are useless. I think whenever the slams are tied, the debates are not useless. The debates are worth having. And also, if you're looking at the rankings right now, I know it's 4,000 points in the rankings, but mind you, Jannik Sinner went on an absolute tear after the U.S. Open last year. So those are on his rankings, but that won't really count at the end of the year. At the end of the year, when we look at who had the best year, we're not gonna care about the rankings points that Sinner had after the U.S. Open last year. We're gonna look at what he had this year, yet to be determined. So I think right now the Player of the Year conversation it's not over. Okay, it's not over right now. Next one from Walker735. Hi, Gill. Since Zverev is the tour leader for first serves in percentage and his second serve is regarded as pretty weak, I was wondering if he could benefit from going for two first serves. Theoretically, using 2024 stats, that would win him 70% of the service points. This is exactly equal to his real service points win rate in 2024. projecting a 0% improvement definitely isn't a good argument for changing a player's game. Is this the main reason why players don't go for 2 first serves? Or is there a deeper reason than simple arithmetic? To be clear, I'm trying to learn not to reinvent the wheel. Hey, regardless, I love it. Great comment. Yeah, there is something more than arithmetic. It's called psychological factors. Very different psychologically when you're double faulting versus when you're losing a typical second serve point. And the logical brain, the mathematician, the analytics people, they can grab their players by the shoulders and shake them and say, look, 1 point is 1 point. Don't you get it? Can't you get it through your thick skull? We're human. We're human. And it is very, very difficult to actually understand that a double fault is the same as losing a second serve point where you lost the rally. Very hard. So the reason why some players, even though statistically, and it's rare, but even though some mathematically would benefit from hitting 2 first serves, they do not want to give their opponents a free point by doing nothing. They feel better when they make the second serve and their opponent in some way or another earns the point. And because they feel better, that's the tactic they go with. It's very interesting. There is one guy who seemingly has gotten over that psychological hump, and that's Giovanni Mpetshi Pericard, the young Frenchman. So, and Sampras started to do it as his career progressed. And God, his second serve was just so good. He wasn't double faulting that much because his second serve was just that good. But Pete realized, hey man, I'm done with this baseline stuff. I'm done, having to work hard to hold. I'm going to just go huge on my second serve. And he had the serve to do it. And he also got over that psychological hump. But yeah, it's really not easy. Next one from David. Good morrow, Mr. Gross. Good morrow to you as well. I would like to talk about the Draper versus Sinner match, and more importantly, about Draper's physical state. Now, very clearly, the humidity got to him, and with him being an English lad who isn't used to that weather, it can be understandable. But on the other side, he played the least amount of tennis you can play at a slam before a semifinal, with not only straight set wins all the way through, but sets that weren't close at all. And he was still gone physically by the second set. I am also high on Draper, as you and Flink are. But are you concerned with the physicality, even though it's improved this year and he's played a lot of tournaments? Cheers. Okay, Jack's explanation for what happened in the Sinner match was very, very interesting. So for those who did not see it, here's what Jack said. Here's what he explained. A, he was unbelievably nervous for the occasion. B, all of those nerves made him feel sick, nauseous. C, because he was nauseous, he wasn't able to eat or drink without puking. Everyone who has been nauseous knows the feeling. You can't eat, you can't drink, you can't hold it down. Okay? Now let's get to D. D, you're not eating and you're not drinking. And it's very humid and you're playing physical tennis. What's going to happen? You're going to be depleted. You're not going to have any energy. That's what happened to Jack Draper. This chain reaction that actually went back not to his fitness, but it went back to his nerves. So often the case. I mean, Tomas Machac against Carlos Alcaraz, and I'm curious, I haven't heard what he said, but it was Davis Cup. He starts cramping at the start of the second set. There is no way that's a fitness thing. That's nerves, right? Carlos Alcaraz in that Roland Garros semifinal against Novak Djokovic last year. He starts cramping at the start of the third set. That's nerves. We all know he's fit enough, but he's too nervous. So Jack actually needs to tackle a little bit of a nerves issue in that respect, which I think he's battled his whole career, by the way. This is not a new thing. And the hope for him would be that it would sort itself out as he gets more used to those occasions. He does work with a sports psychologist, by the way. So he understands that it's a problem. He's trying to sort it. But ultimately, I think experience is going to be his friend in that respect. So am I worried about the physicality? It's getting better and better. So no, I'm feeling optimistic that long term it's going to be fine for him. From This Over PC World, is Zverev moving forward or backward in slams? This year, he would be top 5 fave at every slam, but he fizzled out versus Fritz twice now. With Djokovic out of the picture, this was a serious chance for him. Yeah, I don't know if I see it that way. He hurt his knee at Wimbledon, and something was wrong in New York. I think he was dead tired. He's played a ridiculous number of matches. I think the schedule's been too much for Zverev, and he was coughing. He said at the Olympics that he said this in German, but it looked like there were 2 balls coming at him, that he was dizzy and he had no energy. And at the US Open, he had 0 energy. 0. I've never seen someone look so miserable on the court while still playing pretty good tennis. So he wasn't right. Something was wrong. And that's my read on it. Ultimately, I think the one that stings most for Zverev is the 4th and the 5th set against Alcaraz in the Roland Garros final. But from Maddox, I'm going to go with that. Hey, Gill, what are your thoughts on Ben Shelton's 2024 so far? I think most people are being a little too rough on him. He is 20 in the race, but he has the whole indoor hardcourt / Asia swing in front of him. I feel like he is on the verge of breaking through and being able to compete with the top 10. He is still missing some things, but the match against Zverev and Tiafoe gave me a good sign in terms of his rally tolerance. Kind of bold prediction, he will end 2025 in the top 8 in the world and will be top 4 by the end of 2026. All right. Complicated situation. My thoughts are mixed. On one hand, I do think people are too hard on Ben Shelton. Because of the way he carries himself on the court, people like to crap on him. And therefore, people are like, when he takes a bad loss, there's just a lot of people on the internet who are like, dude sucks, trash. So that's one part of it. Second part of it is he's had these big results at majors, which has led to hype before maybe he's ready to back up that hype. We've seen that this is just a fact of tennis. When you have big runs at the slams, sometimes it accelerates the expectations in a way that's almost like unreasonable and inappropriate. And then you can kind of get the bad side of that, which is that people feel like you're failing when you're not really failing. So I feel like this season, it's been okay for Shelton. However, not going to lie, I've been a little bit frustrated this year with not seeing enough progress, not seeing enough improvement. He has not beaten a top 20 player, by the way, all year long. So no big wins. And just watching him, I agree, great level at the US Open. Great level. Didn't get to see him much in Cincinnati, but seemed like a good level there as well. But before then, like all in all through the year, I've been frustrated that the shot selection doesn't look like it's getting much better. I've been a little bit frustrated that the forehand reliability doesn't seem much better. A little bit frustrated that the spot serving still can be up and down, and that it's not getting more precise. I'm seeing a little flat line, but then US Open, I thought, oh wow, he's playing great. So also, I think Ben should aspire to be more than a Francis Tiafoe in terms of, look, he's a big match player, clearly, and that should serve him. But as great as that is, and it's better than the alternative, it's better than being someone, I won't name names, but someone who kind of shrinks in those spots. But it's best to be a guy who can bring it week in, week out. And he still needs to show that. So, yeah, mixed feelings on Shelton. Those are my thoughts. All right, last one. This one got a ton of likes, so I'm compelled to answer it, even though it's a simple answer. From Lemonius. Hey, Gill, Sinner has obviously had an incredible breakthrough year with several big hardcourt titles and a 55-5 win-loss record. Something else extremely impressive that I don't really see discussion of is that he hasn't played an uncompetitive match so far. In all 5 of his losses, the match has gone to the maximum number of sets the format allowed. Alcaraz in 3 at Indian Wells, Tsitsipas in 3 at Monte Carlo, Alcaraz in 5 at Roland Garros, Medvedev in 5 at Wimbledon, Rublev in 3 at Montreal. I should probably do the research myself, but to your knowledge, is this some kind of record or streak? More importantly, do you think this is relevant, and can we take something from this? Personally, I think this shows unbelievable mental stability and fortitude, as well as obviously ridiculous consistency and evidence of an extremely high floor level of play. Not even Djokovic in 2011 went this long in the year without a couple of marginally more one-sided losses. Well, I think Steve Flink alluded to this in our conversation, saying basically he feels like as good as Jannik's year has been, that it could be better. That some of these losses, especially if you look at like Tsitsipas and Monte Carlo, horrible luck with a terrible call. Some physical issues in some of these matches. Including Rublev in Montreal. Like even the last one that he lost, it looked like his hip was kind of bothering him. So yeah, it feels like for as amazing as it's been, it could have been better. And that in itself is remarkable. I think this is a great thing to point out. In terms of has it been a record, when you said this, the first thing I thought of in my head was, I remember thinking the same thing about Alcaraz 2022. So I went back and I looked. Carlos Alcaraz in 2022 did not lose in straight sets until October. Beginning of October, he lost in straight sets to David Goffin in Astana. I also, I went back and I looked, I thought, what about Federer? I checked a couple of Djokovic seasons. I checked a couple of Federer seasons. Federer 2005 went the whole year without losing in straights. So there's that. Yet another example of the fact that like Federer's dominance. We talked about this when it came to the hardcourt dominance of Sinner in the last year. Tough to beat the level of dominance that Federer achieved in 04, 05, 06. So I will leave it at that. It'll wrap up my U.S. Open coverage. Boy, this has been fun. It's really been a great time. Thank you for everybody who's watched along the way. Thank you to everybody who, and I know this is really late for me to be saying this, but everybody who said hi to me at the U.S. Open, it's so rewarding. First of all, I love these interactions. Second of all, for it to happen more and more often as the years go by is really cool for me. I appreciate all of you. And my last thank you goes to the sponsor of this video, Fume. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.